Ever since the king of cowboys, John Wayne, sat down with the queen of housewives, Lucille Ball, at an awards show many, many years ago and told her, if you want real creative power, you own your own studio. And then Lucille Ball went on to support the invention of Star Trek. We have been traveling out into galaxies far away on ships that blow the rational mind out of the water, and we have tech and characters that we just have grown to love. So that's what we're here to talk about today. We're going to boldly go where no podcast has gone before. Okay, maybe several podcasts before, but we've never been there. So let's go trekking through the nerdy frontier. Right after this, please stand by.
Hi, Puddins! Harley Quinn here, and you're tuned in
No,
to the
Holly,
Bear-
that's my line. You're tuned in to the Bear and Beard podcast. Enjoy the show.
It's like they're lining up. Well, they're excited.
What's going on, fandomites? Welcome to or back to the Bear the Beard podcast. I am the Bear. I'm joined, as always, by my majestically bearded, faithful co-host, Bearded Bride Guy, the Beard. Brosius Mayo, my guy.
Mayo Brosius, my dude, how we doing?
Doing well, doing very well. The introductions don't stop there. We are joined also this episode by returning guests of the show, the two of the co-hosts of the So Geeking Cool podcast. We have Frank and Kevin. What's going on, guys? And our final co-host today is one of our maniac friends from the Umbrellaholics podcast. We have Peter. What's going on, Peter? Welcome to the show.
Kapla, gentlemen.
Kapla. Mecca like a high,
That sounds like a
ho.
little sound effect that Jane Beck might have you say.
That is straight Klingon.
Oh,
that is a language that I wish was available on Duolingo, and if it is, I'm gonna go learn it after I learn Spanish.
Klingon and High Valyrian are on Duolingo.
Really?
You're kidding me?
Okay. All right. I'm fixing to start having a lot of nerdy conversations.
Because who am I kidding? I'm on Duolingo and I'm barely getting Spanish. I can ask where a bathroom is and I can say that I really want a hamburger with cheese.
Dude, I've had Duolingo for like 10 years. I should know way more Spanish than I do. It's awful. Thank you for making me not feel alone.
I have a story to tell for another time, and it's not right now. But I got confused for a Spanish speaker by a Spanish speaker, just on looks alone. So, but we'll tell that story another time. In the meantime,
we've been looking forward to doing this episode for a long time.
Yes.
Because I mean, I've never been a big Star Trek guy, but we got our friends at So Geeking Cool who were big Trekkies, and I've recently started really getting into Star Trek. And then, of course, Peter loves Star Trek. So we had to get everyone together to just talk about all of it. Not even a specific series, just what do we love from this series of all of it.
From the series of serieses.
Yes, it's a series of serieses.
Okay, so let's start that off real quick. To start off this episode, is it a series with different seasons? But there are some series that have multiple seasons. So what is the breakdown for Star Trek? Like, because like there's Star Trek, but then there's Star Trek: The Next Generation. Is that a completely different show? But it's a continuation of the story. So it's unique in that way, right?
The biggest change is The Next Generation is roughly 80 years after Kirk and Spock. So that's why it's called The Next Generation. And it was originally to show how much had advanced since that time.
Okay.
Yeah. So
a lot of us, because I grew up watching original series, and I was still relatively new to it when Next Gen came out, but having a Klingon as a member of the crew, that was just mind-blowing at the time.
Yeah, so the original series was kind of more of a way for them to talk about really serious things on network television that censors normally would not have allowed them to talk about, right? So Klingons represented a faction of the Cold War. Romulans represented the Chinese. I guess the Klingons were the Soviet Union, right, Kevin?
Yes.
So the bridge of the Enterprise was supposed to show you that at some point in the future, mankind would set aside their petty differences, and you had a Russian, you had a Japanese helmsman, you had Uhura, who was the first African American to be featured in a prominent role. She was not just a member of the crew; she was a bridge officer. She had rank. You had she had respect. You had an alien, Mr. Spock, who was a Vulcan, and then you had Bones, who was a country doctor from Georgia, who actually went to Ole Miss.
Damn it, Jim! I'm not a doctor.
No, he was a doctor.
I know.
He was not a bricklayer. He was not a mason. He was not.
Doctor was the only thing he was.
Right. He wasn't an escalator or an elevator.
Yeah. And
I gotta say, speaking of Bones, oh, sorry.
Because you got to think at the time, the 1960s, there was a lot of social strife in the world. You had this TV show where everybody come together and everybody used their unique talents and gifts to solve the problem.
Yeah.
It was more so in the Next Generation, because original series, it was centered, Kirk, Spock, McCoy. It was a different time, the way television was made back then, but you still had you had your variety of crew members who would come together to help solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
If I had wanted Russian history, Mr. Knight, I would have brought along Mr. Chekhov.
And that's so fun too, because it also had, like I said in the intro, very humble origins. Like Lucille Ball sat down at an awards table with John Wayne. John Wayne told her, "Look, I'm starting up my own production company because I want control over what I'm doing. If you want the same, you're going to have to do the same." She created her own studio, backed Star Trek through the first 2 pilots being filmed. And if it had not, a lot of people will tell you, even people close to the show to this day, if not for Lucille Ball, the show would have ended after the first few episodes. It would have been done.
I think of everything that's spawned off of Star Trek. Not just the Star Trek series themselves, but we'll talk later about imitations of Star Trek. Like, this is a huge franchise that still today is pumping out new series that are engaging fans. It's up there with like Doctor Who, with like being something that's for the older generations, and there's something for new people now. I love shows like that.
Think about how less cool it would have been for Shatner to go in space with Musk if he had never been Kirk.
Who would have cared? Just another celebrity going to space? Okay,
Lucille Ball made that cool.
I mean, arguably, would Shatner have been able to go into space had he not been Kirk?
He wouldn't have been asked.
That's a fair point.
Right.
Yeah.
Why else was he asked? You got to make Kirk go to space.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Well, so to start out the episode, let's get some humble beginnings of our own in here with the topic of what got you into Trek. And we'll let our guest hosts, because I'll go ahead and tell you right now, top of the episode, I'm not a Trekkie. I've watched a few of the seasons of the series. I like them. I love them. I'm way more of an Orville fan than anything else, and we'll talk about that later. But so what got each of you guys into Star Trek? I guess we'll start with Peter being the odd man out, the newest of the attendees.
I don't know. Like at one point, I was asking people, do you remember your first vampire movie? Because for a lot of people, it's like, I don't know, vampires were just always a thing, and you kind of grew up with it. For me, I don't remember my first Star Trek experience. Like Star Trek was just always a thing. I know I started with Next Generation, a couple episodes here and there, and I was always a big science fiction fan. It had everything. It was in the future, and there were lasers, and there were teleporters, and like, how do you not just love it? I'm kind of in between the Beard and the So Geeking Cool guys, where there's so much I still have to watch and go back through. But there's a bunch I have watched, and it stands. It's still so much fun to watch, and the stories are great, and it's still in the future, so it's extra cool.
What year was the original Star Trek set in? Does anyone know?
It was
Set in or
20. The show was set in 2264.
2264. Okay.
Yeah.
so it's still in our future.
Yeah. So,
It was 1966. You know.
well, it's like the fictional birthplace of Captain Kirk in real life has a thing that's their claim to fame, is that they're the future birthplace of Captain Kirk. So, and I know that in that year, you know, as long as we don't, you know, burn ourselves up with climate change and everything else before then, that year is going to be a record number of James Kirk blanks born.
Jeez,
You know,
100%.
that wouldn't surprise me at all. I never thought about that, but like that's probably true for a lot of series, is that like are set in the future and like you know the date that they're born.
Yep.
And if you're a big enough fan, of course.
Imagine those classrooms, like James, 12 kids say here. James Kirk, same 12 kids. James Tiberius, yeah, never mind. Just you're all here.
just you're all here. It's fine.
I just want to know how many kids in Kansas are named after, you know, Clark Kent. Is that a thing?
That's got to
good
be.
It's probably a thing.
I think because isn't there an actual Smallville, Kansas? I'm pretty sure there is.
so.
I don't believe there is.
I'll have to look that up. That's a DC topic. We'll have to look that up.
There's
I'll
gotta
wanna
be.
know. There's got to be now. New city gets formed, yeah, for sure. Or they're change their name, probably.
Yeah.
All right. Kevin, what got you into Trek?
Well, I was 6, 7 years old, and one night flipping through TV channels, saw this big monster alien head, and I was like, "What is this?" So I watched it, and the episode was called the Corbomite Maneuver. First episode I ever watched. That's what drew me in. And I see this big, scary-looking alien thing, and then see these, you know, Kirk and them, you know, they wasn't fighting pretty much. They was, you know, Kirk and they was trying to escape from him. And it just, you know, the way everything looked, you know, you had the futuristic-looking bridge and, you know, all the people together, and then, you know, the special effects at the time, it drew me in. And especially just watching how everybody, you know, got along, no differences, you know, everyone, you know, was together.
You have 10 Earth minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That's always been my favorite thing about sci-fi stuff. It's been this many years on your planet. How the hell would you know? Like,
Right.
You're way out here in space. You don't know how we catalog time. That's one thing they did on the Orville that they did on the Orville, right? I thought very well. And I haven't watched enough Star Trek to know if they've kind of gone back on that. But yeah, all those older futuristic shows, you have 10 Earth minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, do you know how long an Earth minute is? How do you know?
Actually, I was just say in that episode, the reason they knew is the Viserius, which was the starship that had the Enterprise caught in its grasp, had already searched their complete computer index.
Really?
And knew everything about them. So Kirk, and this is going to be
that's a
me
good
nerding
plot
out for a
device to
second.
not have to come up with a way to take out time.
Well, and this was one of those classic episodes, like Kevin just said. That was my first episode too, by the way. And Kevin and I have been friends since first grade. We've talked a lot of Star Trek over the years. And what was cool about this episode is it really showed you the dynamic between Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. And there was another member of the bridge crew who was really freaking out. And Kirk actually dismisses him from his post. And McCoy comes over because McCoy was always the moral compass of Kirk. And he starts just laying into Kirk. And Kirk kind of loses his temper. And he says, "Anytime you think you can bluff me, Doctor." And he has this epiphany. He's like, wait a second. They know everything about us. I've been playing chess because him and Spock famously played 3D chess. He's like, I'm playing the wrong game. I need to be playing poker. So he creates this story that you will not find this in any of our computer databases, but we have this material in our ship called Corbomite, And if you destroy us, then an equal and opposite reaction will destroy you. So the guy was like, the alien has to go, well, if it's not in their computer index, how do I verify it's real? I don't want to blow up their ship to find out. So it was, that's what hooked me. It was like, wow, this is really awesome.
How it was overcome with a mental, not physical, by physical means.
Right.
The mind game.
I'm just a little disappointed that none of y'all said that Shatner's pause acting is what drew you in. Like
that was
the
it.
famous
pause. Episode, he actually said, he tells Spock, not just Spock, poker. You know the game. You know the game. You know the game. So,
it's been one of my favorite things to make fun of over the years. Like they do a great job of making fun of Shatner on Futurama. Calculon is definitely supposed to be Shatner. 100%.
Yeah. So is Zap Brannigan. So it's like
and Zap. Yeah, it's both of them. Oh man, that's great. Brian, what got you into Star Trek?
So my dad, huge Trekkie. So it's like Peter said, it was kind of always there, but the first time I remember actually like paying attention and really diving into the story and like loving it was Star Trek Voyager. They're trapped on this far other side of space, and their whole mission is just to get home, but they're still going with that Star Trek mission of exploring new worlds, making new contacts. And so they're still like, they still have their missions every episode, but their main goal is to keep finding a way home because they're stranded.
There's the
and
underlying
something about that story and Captain Janeway, Captain Janeway and the Doctor, whose name I don't remember. Was he just the Doctor?
he was just the Doctor.
He was just the Doctor, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like he had an evolution throughout the show where at first he was just a program that was there. You couldn't touch him. But over the course of the show, he evolved more and became more like he could go out. He ended up having like a way to go out of the ship, and
his mobile emitter.
Yeah. Yep. And just became more and more real. And so they could use him more. And I just loved it. I loved the whole show.
Actually, meeting him in person at Pensacon several years ago, dude, he was awesome. He actually hosted, we didn't get to go to this, but he hosted something at their planetarium. Remember that, Kevin? Like the night?
Yeah, it was part of that astronomical society.
Yeah.
Dude, I couldn't imagine like having a voice known for being on Star Trek, just navigating you through a planetarium experience.
Especially like his voice, because he's in a lot of other stuff too. I can never remember his name, but he's one of those actors when I see him, I'm like, oh, the guy from this and the guy from that. What'd you say?
Robert Picardo. He's actually he reoccurs.
His name's actually Picardo, but they didn't cast him as Picard.
Yeah.
Blasphemy.
They are both bald.
Yeah, that's true. I'm kind of like you. Like it's just always been there. None of my family was big into Trek. I did remember. I have a vague memory of knowing that one of the actors from Star Trek Next Generation also hosted Reading Rainbow.
Yeah, that was like the best Reading Rainbow episode when they toured the Enterprise.
Yeah, so I think that's what, because I mean, Reading Rainbow was big for me. I've always been into literature and stuff like that. I don't read nearly as much as I should now, but I have audiobooks, and that's the same thing.
I was going to say, and the irony is he can't read.
Yeah, and the irony is I can't read. But yeah, no, it's finding that out, I think, was a good driving force to get me to check it out. And I'm huge into sci-fi. Like I used to have the Star Wars trilogy on VHS, like when they released it as the remastered thing on VHS in that gold and black box. So sci-fi has always been in my world. But I know that I didn't watch any of the original, series. I had to have started with Next Generation, if anything else.
And see, I know I've seen Next Generation. I know that at some point, because my dad was always watching that one over and over again. If I rewatched it or I was watching it with someone, I could probably predict things that are going to happen, even though right now, if you quizzed me on it, couldn't tell you a thing.
Well, I can't speak to anybody else's experience, but as a kid growing up, like Kevin said, I started out with the original series and loved it. And then the original series of movies were great. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, arguably the best. So when The Next Generation came out at first, I was not a fan because it wasn't the Trek I was used to. But over time, you develop that relationship with the crew.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing happened. All right. Not necessarily. So Deep Space Nine, I immediately liked it. That was the one Star Trek show that I really, really liked. And it became even better as the show went on. And of course, they added Mr. Worf to it to give you a familiar character from TNG. When Voyager came out, I was not a fan at first. And it was because I wasn't crazy about the Alien of the Week formula. They were going back, in my opinion, they were kind of going back to what they did on TOS or the original series. But it got better also. And that's the thing. It's like, except for the original series, it seems like TNG, DS9, and Voyager all hit their stride in the third season.
But question, once you've gotten to that point where you enjoy that show, can you go back and watch the first season and love it more?
Yes.
Because I always compare this show with Doctor Who, being as it's been intergenerational. It shows a hero that's not always like, he's not blasting in the front door to have a big fight. It's usually a logical conclusion. Like, they have to figure something out. They have to outsmart the enemy.
Yeah.
And one other way is like when the Doctor regenerates. It sounds like you guys had the same experience with a series as fans of Doctor Who have when a Doctor regenerates. When they first regenerate, that first season, we're like, not feeling it. Then the second season comes in and it's rocking it. And we go back and watch that first season of that Doctor and it's amazing. So
Right.
I think this show might have that same effect for you guys. That's amazing.
Well,
Seeing the
I
parallel.
mean, when you're talking about two of the longest running sci-fi television shows on television, I mean, since like we said in the beginning, Star Trek is not a new show every time it comes out. Technically, it is all one continuing story. Same thing with Doctor Who, classic Who to modern Who. It's all one story. It's just spanned over generations. It's like The Simpsons, but without the characters staying the same the entire time.
Right.
So,
all right. So Peter, I don't know you very well, but I can see that you're wearing a Washington, D.C. shirt. I'm a big fan of the Commanders, previously the Redskins. So that gives you a little bit of cool, in my opinion. When you watched Star Trek Enterprise, did you like it immediately?
Enterprise is still on my list. So I did a run through of Next Generation, Voyager, DS9, and Picard. So I still have the other 4 to go.
All right.
That being said, and this is where it's tough, because I know Enterprise is a prequel to TOS, right? I like Scott Bakula, but it's funny. I can appreciate what the Beard said with Doctor Who when there's a regeneration. Like, for me, David Tennant was my Doctor Who. I mean, Chris Eccleston was okay, but David Tennant was my Doctor Who, and then Matt Smith comes in, and it's like, ugh, this is not David Tennant. Give it 2 or 3. Well, I mean, they only did 3, but by season 2 of Matt Smith, it's like, oh my God. And then all of his storylines, and it's like, oh God, who do I like more now? I think the big difference, though, with Doctor Who and Star Trek, I'm having trouble with this, because Doctor Who is one continuous story, where Star Trek, it's like Law and Order, right? There's 6 different offshoots of Law and Order, and they all kind of intersect, sort of, but they're separate stories, where there's more defined separation. But I guess you can make that argument when every time Doctor Who regenerates, because it's new companions, new bad guys ish. I don't think I understand the formula. Like, I want it to be a lot different than it might be.
I think each of those shows that you just brought up and each of the shows we brought up, actually, now that we're sitting down and discussing them, are all unique in a way compared to modern television. Like, because we've been put into, especially thanks to like Netflix and companies like that, it's like, okay, season 1, cool. Season 2, cool. Season 3, cool. we're gonna go until you tell us to stop, and we might write ourselves into corners or something like that. These shows, Doctor Who, even Law and Order. You brought up Law and Order, which I'm a huge fan, by the way.
Who isn't?
Law and Order, Star Trek, Doctor Who, like these are the shows where it's like, okay, it's all one universe, it's all the same story ish, but we're going to tell you a different side of the story.
Right. And I think the difference between what has done it and what shows did it and what shows didn't do it, is it just success? Because if you have a show that's successful enough and you have a character with a decent enough backstory that they can anchor their own spinoff, well, why not? I mean, as much fun as it's to produce content for fans, people want to make money, and they're not going to invest in a show that's not going to make money. So is that the goal for all shows? Is just how good can we make it where we can have spinoffs and create a universe?
But not every show gets to do that. Example one I will give you is the Arrowverse from the CW, where
I disagree.
It starts with Arrow, great show, start to finish. You get Barry. Barry comes in, he gets a spinoff, cool. He gets his own show. His show, I think, finally ending this season, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
They ran out of people. They've gone as fast as they can go.
But
they ran out.
You watch DC's Legend of Tomorrow. First season or two, okay. Third season, you lost me. Finally, they were like, okay, this show's done. And then Arrow's like, no, we're done with this show too. Now the Flash is the only one that still exists.
Supergirl.
Supergirl. And there's another one too that's just started. I don't know if that happens.
I guess we have to mention Batwoman. Yeah. But okay, so Supergirl didn't technically start from the CW, from the Arrowverse, though.
But it became part of it.
Yeah, it became but that's the first season I didn't bring it up because they didn't spawn it off of Arrow.
Not originally, but I think they always had the intention of that, because even it was very early on in Supergirl that they had the crossover with the Flash, and that's why they did the different worlds thing. But so the thing with any series is some series cannot create a show that's going to never end. But what Doctor Who and what Star Trek do is they're not just continuing the same series. Like, I know Arrowverse creates different shows, but those shows have to set up these shows. These shows don't have to set up each other. Like Kevin and Frank said, the Next Generation takes place a long time after the original series. And so nothing the original series had to do to set up Next Generation. They just had to create their own story. All the Arrowverse stuff, they set up the next thing. So that's kind of the difference there, in my opinion.
I think any kind of comic book situation is different, right? Because Marvel and DC created universes, but it really is the same thing, right? You've got somebody with special powers fight somebody that's bad with special powers, and you just give them a different name, different cape, different ability, and it really is the same.
No capes. No.
Star Trek is different in each series. Like, there's some Star Trek series I can get into and some that I can't. I lost interest in Star Trek Discovery, and then I got back into it. Like, Star Trek Discovery is one I'm watching now. I'm going to be on episode 5, and that's one that, as much as I loved Strange New Worlds, I didn't have that same feeling with this. And so, like he was saying, with the superhero ones, it's the same premise in every single show. Yeah. But with Star Trek, it's a little different with every show. Yeah, they're in space, but the premise
a breed all
of
its own. So,
well, and this is what I'll say about Star Trek that makes it different, in my opinion, is Star Trek doesn't necessarily revolve around the actions of one crew. That show may. But the overarching idea was Roddenberry's utopian future where mankind would work together to explore the stars and make a better environment, not just for ourselves, but for everyone. That's what the Federation promises. And if you'll notice, in each iteration of Star Trek, it's almost like those crews have to remind the Federation that was the Federation's goal in the first place. There's always that moment. You know, Kirk goes through it when I never trusted Klingons and I never will. But at the end of Star Trek 6, he actually saves the Klingon Chancellor to remind everyone there, and if we can't treat them with the respect and with the openness that we treat everyone else with, then we failed our mission.
That's right.
So in that, sorry, go ahead.
No. I was going to say that's to me that's what makes Star Trek slightly different. Is you're more married to the overall theme than you are each individual crew. That's why you can have as many spinoffs as you want to.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, I haven't given this any thought, but so you could almost say that the similarities between all the series is that they're evangelicals, just spreading the good word of the Federation and Starfleet to all these systems and cultures that don't have it.
it does
Basically,
become a religion.
We're spreading the good news.
It is, but at the same token, it also shows you how easily that evangelical idea can become corrupted. Over and over again, some existential threat seeps its way in and then corrupts the Federation from the top down. It's happening right now in Picard. Spoiler alert.
And that's what
hasn't watched.
That's where I am in Discovery. Like, I hate this captain in Discovery. Like the main captain, not the first captain in the first few episodes. I thought the first couple episodes of Star Trek Discovery was going to be what it was, and then it all changed, and that's what disconnected me from it at first. But now I'm getting back into it.
Well, I was going to say, and Discovery is going to take you on a roller coaster, and then the last season I think is probably this past season. The last season's about to come out, but was the best because they went so far into the future. They were writing completely new stuff, and they were no longer chained by canon. Like they didn't have to worry about, we're going to kick off fans. They're doing their own thing. And it's actually a really cool concept because the Federation has been broken and they're trying to bring it back together and spread the good word.
Let me ask a sort of random question. You mentioned Gene Roddenberry's vision was a utopia of sorts, and that was the Federation. Mm-hmm. You can argue, and it's based on perspective, that the Borg is also a utopia.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's what the Federation, and that's actually something that they kind of address, is we're not the only solution. I don't know if you've been watching Picard.
Yeah.
Okay, I would say the season 2 ending of Picard almost kind of answered that question.
Yeah.
Well, my question was going to be that given, you watch Star Trek and our future is Starfleet and the Federation, but based on how we look in 2023 for the human race, is our future more Starfleet or more Borg as technology rises?
Well, according to
I'm thinking more Terminator Salvation.
Well, if you watch First Contact, that's kind of what happens after World War III.
Things have to get a lot worse before they get better.
Yeah,
right. We have to get to our lowest point before we go, hey, wait.
Yeah,
we're stupid. We should be working together instead of destroying each other.
Yeah.
I think eventually, way beyond our kids' time, humankind will eventually get to a place where we want to work together more. Because really, Star Trek isn't wrong. We all logically know that if our whole planet could work together and drop our differences, we could evolve so much faster.
Yeah.
I'm not going from a moral perspective. I guess I'm going more from the way our technology advances, the way we utilize technology in our everyday life. Could we see, I mean, it's going to sound silly, but could we see a future as Borg-style cyborgs? The Cybermen from Doctor Who?
I wouldn't see it going that far personally. I could see us using technology to enhance ourselves, but I think the human fear of like leaving behind our human selves would stop us from, unless someone did it to us, we didn't have a choice. I don't think the average person would decide, hey, I'm going to cut off all my emotion and just be this robot.
Yeah, I think the human drive for personality would put us more on the Starfleet path than, but we would still have to band together.
I don't know. Cults are a thing.
Well, cults are a thing.
There could be a sector of humans who do it, but I don't think it'll be all of us.
But yeah, if you think about it, that's actually how they got 7 of 9 out of the Borg Collective, was they appealed to her humanity.
Yeah.
You know, and Hugh, I mean,
how about 7 of 9?
seven. But Hugh of Borg was also he was an individual because he got tired of being part of this robotic collective.
Well,
So-
he was.
It's
It was
just so
shown-
boring doing meaningless tasks and math all day. Like, I just want to be a person,
Right. What were you gonna say, Kevin?
Well, Hugh was shown what it could be like to be detached from all that and actually be an individual. That's when because he become friends with Geordi, and he discovered, hey, this is much better. I can do what I want to, have my own thoughts, and have friendships rather than you're just forced to do whatever the hive mind tells you to do.
But you see the positive too when you look at Seven of Nine when she is separated from the collective, and she is a beast on Voyager. Like, she is so much better than everybody, even the computer. Like, she enhances the computer. Like, who's not looking at her like, damn, I kind of want to be Borg. That's dope.
So is she?
wanna
What
be on
else
the
is she
Falcon
in
ship.
besides Voyager? Because I only remember her from Voyager.
Picard.
She's in
Picard.
Picard, yeah.
Hard.
I really do need to start Picard. See, I asked Frank one day, is it possible for me to watch Picard without remembering anything from the Next Generation? And he gave me that answer, so I need to just start watching it, but I just haven't yet.
I
She's
feel like
kinda-
that could
Sorry,
be
go
the
ahead.
same for any of the Star Trek iterations, though. Like,
Well-
you can pick any of them up separately from
I just
their predecessor or their next.
I just didn't know, because it's the crew from the Next
Yeah.
Generation, if there was going to be so much storyline and so much plot that I wasn't going to remember that I'm not going to get anything out of it.
No, because they're different too.
Yeah. And I've actually
Now, season 3, you might watch a little bit of TNG because there is some callback to TNG. But seasons 1 and 2, you can watch it as a standalone show.
there are callbacks, but they're not required. I mean,
Yeah.
you'll still enjoy it. And that's what I was going to say is I actually know people who have only watched the Star Trek movies. They've never watched any of the series, but they've watched
Which one?
They've watched the original 6 movies.
Oh,
You want to
okay.
know which friends? The original 6 and all of the TNG movies, and they enjoyed them just fine. I'm like, you didn't even know the characters. How did you like it? They're like, well, I knew that the guys in these uniforms were the good guys and anyone else was not. I was like, well, I guess that makes sense.
Can I throw a
I-
curveball into this conversation since you brought up the movies?
Sure.
I actually enjoy these movies. What are your thoughts on these 3 movies?
I really,
Star
really
Trek.
like Star Trek Beyond.
I really like Into Darkness. That's my favorite one.
Well, I loved Benedict playing
Oh.
Khan.
See, I think I know why you don't like Into Darkness. And my dad, when we watched it, because he loved the original series and he loved the original movies, and he said they basically just copied some of the other movies and they changed stuff.
yeah,
But since
they did
I
it-
don't have that pre-knowledge, I get to just enjoy it. So, haha.
Right.
It's like a standalone movie, yeah, movie, but I'm so emotionally attached to Trek lore that I can't watch it and feel good because Han only be played by Ricardo Montalban. He like
Benedict Cumberbatch.
he
was great, but he should have been a different character besides Khan.
Well, I think the first one was a really good movie for it to be a different universe. It's the Kelvin
the fact
universe.
that Chris Hemsworth plays Kirk's dad.
Yeah. And I think Chris Pine was an excellent Kirk. I think
Yeah.
that Carl Urban was the perfect Bones.
Oh yes,
Um,
love Carl Urban. We love him
amazing.
from the boys.
He's
too.
amazing in everything. I just,
Butcher.
Yeah.
Billy
Yeah.
Butcher.
He did a great job recasting everybody from the movies. I'll give him that. The only one
So-
I'm apprehensive about it is Simon Pegg as Scotty. That's the only one
Yeah.
I'm all apprehensive about. But the rest of them, that they nailed it.
When
Yeah.
my dad and I watched those movies, he said that he loved them, but he could see why some Star Trek fans who couldn't separate wouldn't enjoy it. But the way he saw it, and the way I would too, because I love looking at things from different timelines, is it is a different timeline. It's not supposed to be the same as the other stuff, but I think they told a good story.
Yeah.
And my dad actually loved the mirroring when there was a moment, I can't remember the details because he explained to me what happened in the other movie, where Spock and Kirk had actually traded places in a moment of life and death that was different in the old movie.
Mhm.
And he actually loved how that was a mirror.
Yeah, I think that's probably what Kevin and I hate about it, to be honest. But it's only
Good point. This is
because-
why I hate it.
I love it. I love it. That thing, that's nope.
Yeah, well, it's because in Star Trek 2 that sacrifice that Spock makes is almost perfect. Like the emotion. Anyone who says that Shatner is not a good actor should watch Star Trek 2. And throughout that movie, it is probably his greatest acting. And there was a secret that the director used on him. Right.
Yeah.
He would actually just let him do as many takes as he wanted until he was exhausted, and then he would deliver the perfect take at the point when he was no longer trying to be William Shatner.
That's the famous Khan come
right.
from. Nicholas Meyer take after take after take after take, and then Shatner finally just got ticked off and it's like just yelled, and that's where the scene come from.
That's amazing.
But he was able to.
That.
Yeah, he was able to emote real genuine emotion.
When you have a director so smart that he out Shatner and makes him
tricks him into acting better.
Makes him wait until he's not Shatner.
Exactly.
But Spock and Ron is probably my top one in my top 3 favorite of all Trek, and just to see In the Darkness just flip it like that, it was, to me, it was just almost insulting. He took that great scene and just did that to it.
I wasn't insulted by it, but I could see it coming from a mile away, and I think that took my enjoyment away. It wasn't. I mean, I own the movie on Blu-ray. I own all 3 of the Kelvin movies, and to me, Beyond was excellent. I mean, it was a totally new story. It almost felt like a really, really long episode of the original series.
I love that.
That same debate is had over at Star Wars though. Y'all aren't alone. Like the midichlorian count being invented for Phantom Menace, it was so upsetting. It's like, why did you take something that was magical and had no explanation and give it an explanation? That's why a lot of fans didn't like it. But
I never viewed it that way, and I think that's why I always enjoy Star Wars more than other Star Wars fans. I love it all. I always saw that as like, although the Force is a living thing and it's out there and it's everywhere and it's magical, that they had a way to like measure how much the Force was like flowing through someone.
No, and I'm with you. Like I'm one of those that I wasn't upset about it, but I was also young when Phantom Menace came out.
I thought I heard that midichlorians were created just so that the movies would be sci-fi and not fantasy.
So I've heard different reports, but all of it comes back to one of the points you made earlier, that these companies want to make money. They knew that Phantom Menace needed to be marketed toward a younger generation. So they made a few tweaks to George Lucas. I mean, George Lucas did these tweaks himself. It's not like he was off the project for Phantom Menace, but he tweaked his own story to go, okay, well, they're not going to like this because this doesn't go toward kids as much as it goes toward my fans of my original 3 movies that were kids then. So, but if this is what the company wants, and that's why we got characters like Jar Jar Binks that were angled toward kids. We got the dual wielding lightsaber for Darth Maul because it was cool to have more of a bow staff looking weapon. There's a bunch of different little things that
I absolutely had one of those.
He didn't want to change, but he tweaked it in his way to still have control over it. And even now in shows like The Mandalorian, it's not, they don't bring up midichlorians anymore. It's an M count. It's, they're like, okay, we don't want to upset people. Let's brush it.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to say it, but we're not going to say it that way. And I could see where Star Trek fans would be upset about the new movies.
But I mean, there is always a science to science fiction though.
Yes.
And that's a good segue into another topic we have that I really want to hear
Yes.
Kevin and Frank talk about the ships and tech of Star Trek, because I remember asking you guys just random rhetorical questions when we were hanging out in Pensacola. And I'd just be like, what if Voyager and the original series ship had to fight each other? And like I was just like expecting like a casual conversation, but you guys like knew like the ships down to like their names and like the kind of weaponry they had, the kind of engines they had, like so much science lore that you guys knew. And I just talk about that. What's up with that?
Well, all right. I'm going to start out by saying my favorite ship of all time is the original Enterprise. Got the big, huge thing behind me with the schematics. I've got this is a replica of the plaque. I've got the comm system. Nice. I've got environmental controls. But that being said, I won't lie and say that the original Enterprise could take any ship in the Star Trek universe. The coolest ship, in my opinion, there's Kevin's Playmobil Enterprise. The coolest ship I think that they ever created in Star Trek for the Federation was probably the Defiant.
Yeah.
It could cloak. It was the ship that they created. All right, so Deep Space Nine, I told you that was a great show, right? I loved it from the very beginning. But by about, the fifth takeover of the space station, because they were stuck on a space station, they realized, they need a better way to get around than shuttlecrafts or runabouts. So we need to give them their own ship. So they created a ship called the Defiant, and it was a lot more advanced. It had better armor plating. It had better shields. It had a cloaking ability. It could do things that no Federation ship could do before it, basically.
Can I ask a quick question? Because you're the tech and specs guys. What is the difference between a shuttle and a runabout?
A runabout is substantially larger. It can transport a lot more people, material, supplies. It can go basically warp 9.8, almost as fast as a starship. They're more of a multi-purpose. You can use them for evacuation, for resupply, for long range surveillance.
Okay. They actually have weapons.
Yeah, weapons, torpedo launchers, phaser banks.
Now there were shuttlecrafts that could be outfitted with phasers, but they were much weaker and not nearly as efficient.
And there were some shuttlecrafts that could only hold, say, 2 people. Especially during TNG, the earlier seasons, you have real small shuttlecrafts. Some of them I could do like warp 1, warp 2, still take you hours or days to get somewhere. Now in the original series, those shuttlecrafts didn't have warp drive; they just had simple impulse engine. So if you got stuck in the middle of space somewhere, you were out of luck because you couldn't get to a nearest planet or star base and survive.
Or if someone had stolen your starship and you needed to get back for a court martial and you had to take a shuttlecraft, it was going to take a really long time.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank
you. Considering you did that in the Shatner voice, I'm guessing that's exactly something that happened.
Yes. Yes.
The runabout was one of the most advanced, advancements in shuttle technologies because they were multi-purpose.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Deep Space Nine, they almost ran out of rivers, Earth rivers to name them after because they kept getting destroyed the first 3 seasons. they get a new one, and Cisco says we're gonna name it the Rubicon, and Kira says it was a good thing Earth has so many rivers.
The Jem'Hadar kept messing them up.
Yep.
Yeah, I would say going back to the original series, even though the Enterprise was my favorite ship, my favorite alien ship was actually the Romulan bird of prey. You don't hear many people talk about that one. It was from one of the best episodes, in my opinion. It was called Balance of Terror. And you find out that Spock's dad was casually a Romulan commander at one point in time. It's the same actor. It's not his dad. It just happened to be another pointed ear Grace.
Yeah, Balance of Terror was the time when they discovered that Vulcans and Romulans used to be the same people that had split 1 or 2,000 years before. So they were basically, cousins, of each other, but they were technically the same race. They just, over the centuries had evolved little minor differences in their physiology. But yeah, the same actor, Mark Leonard, he played the Romulan commander first scene, Balance of Terror, then he played Sarah throughout the rest of Star Trek originally.
It's also responsible for one of the best lines Kirk ever gave, because this guy is giving Spock a hard time, and he keeps saying, "How do we know he's not somehow affiliated with the enemy?" And Kirk basically says, "There's no room for bigotry on my bridge," and shuts it down.
Yeah, he actually grabs the guy by the back of his chair and spins him around and says, "Leave any bigotry in your quarters. There's no room on my bridge."
Right. It was like, whoa, this is so awesome. Because again, in the 1960s,
Different time.
Not the policy of America, we'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah, promo time, yeah.
This episode of the Bear and the Beard podcast is brought to you by, well, you.
That's right, Fandomites. We have launched a Patreon for the show, and we're asking you to be a part of it.
We are going to take out only what is necessary to keep the show going and to keep attending live events every month.
And the amount of funds still in the Patreon after that will be donated to our friends over the Children's of Mississippi.
That's right. In return for your generosity, the different tiers will receive different things: spring store discounts, exclusive bonus content, freebies at live events, and more.
So it's a win-win-win.
Shut up and take my money.
You help us keep the cost of the show down, get cool perks, and donate to a great cause.
Sounds simple enough. Join the Patreon today and stay awesome,
stay bearded, and much love. So, recently what's really gotten me into Star Trek was our conversation down at Pensacola. I wanted to give a show a try, and the one I gave a try right away was Strange New Worlds.
Excellent.
And as far as I'm concerned, out of anything Star Trek I've watched, although I've seen all of Voyager and I loved it, and I know I remember loving it, Strange New Worlds is perfect to me, and I hope it's a show that doesn't end anytime soon. Because I love how it's a mix of some of the crew from the original series because it takes place before that. But there's also some new things in there. So I really get to go in. I don't have to, since I don't know anything about the original series, I can literally go in knowing nothing at all about any of the lore, because it's almost like a beginning, even though there's stuff that happens before that. But
yeah. So what I think will be cool once Strange New Worlds finishes is you could literally pick up Star Trek Enterprise and watch those for 5 seasons.
4 seasons.
4 seasons, yeah. There was going to be that's right. 4 seasons of Enterprise. Then you could watch Strange New Worlds, and then that should theoretically line right up with the original series. So you would have a very established timeline going back to the NX-01, which is Scott Bakula's ship, which was the first ship capable of Warp 5. They go out, do all these first contacts. It's an excellent show. And I'm ashamed to say the only reason I didn't give it a chance when it aired the first time is because it had a theme song with lyrics.
I remember you telling me about that.
I was like,
I remember watching that one, actually. My dad got into it because that has the guy from Quantum Leap in it.
Yeah, Scott Bakula.
Mm-hmm. So that one bored me. I only watched a few episodes, and I was younger when I watched it. It was still earlier, but it kind of bored me.
Oh, what I liked about it is that it was supposed to be set 100 years, or actually 110 years before Kirk.
Right.
Okay. Making the show when they was producing it in 2000, 2001. Obviously, they can't make it look like it was made in the 60s, but they did go back and make it look as retro as possible, but still be a new show for the time. So, for example, Star Trek, they had the doors that open automatically, turbo lift doors. Well, at Enterprise, you had to push a button to get the door to open, stuff like that.
Okay.
They still had the little pocket flip communicators. They didn't have the comm system. you didn't use a transporter. You had a little shuttle pod they went down to planets with. You had a transporter, but it was just
experimental.
Yeah.
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 Crew was scared to use it because it had just been approved for biomatter, but it still could be a little flaky. So
And
stuff like that is what really made it stand out to me. Is that yes, it was modern production values, but they did try to make it look. Even if you look at some of the captures, like the control panels for the ship, still had buttons instead of touchscreen.
Right.
They had knobs, so that's what I that's what I loved about it.
I love dedication to detail like that. Like that was one of my favorite things for WandaVision. And I know it's a completely separate universe, but when you watch the behind the scenes of the making of WandaVision, they talk about how that first episode that was black and white, it was supposed to be very bewitched, very Dick Van Dyke. They did they painted the set the right color, like just like they did back in the day, black and white filming. They got older
Pulley
tech
system
to
the
film.
magic.
They did pulley systems with the strings. Like they didn't count on CGI. They were like, we want to make it organic. We want to make it real.
When you go back and look at Star Trek the original series, the bridge set especially, you had these bright, vibrant colors, like the red guardrail that goes around the center of the bridge or behind Kirk's chair. It was bright red. The doors was bright red. The reason it was like that is because at the time, the panels is that most people still had black and white TVs. So that's why they used those color schemes. They showed up better on black and white televisions.
Right.
Huh.
So
Now, go ahead.
I was going to say one cool thing is on the anniversary of the original series or the anniversary of Star Trek, you still had Deep Space Nine going. You still had Voyager going, and you had Enterprise going. So TNG had already had. I'm sorry, you didn't have Enterprise yet. TNG had already had guest star appearances from DeForest Kelley, from Leonard Nimoy, and from James Doohan. So Bones, Spock, and Scotty. On the anniversary episodes of DS9, you had an episode called Trials and Tribulations where they went back to an original series episode. And the technology they used was so awesome. I mean, it really looked like they were on the ship with the original series crew.
About the time that Forrest Gump came out, and you remember Forrest Gump, they took Tom Hanks and put him in like with
Yeah.
They use that same technology in Trials and Troops, so they managed to put Avery Brooks and in the background there with Shatner and Nimoy from the episode, and
they had them interact, which was a lot of fun.
Right.
On the special DVD I have of it, they was talking about filming that, and whenever they was pitching the idea to Rick Berman and them, special that they made a reel, and it was a scene from Trouble with Tribbles where Kirk's on the bridge, and he walks in, he walks around, he sits in his chair, and he sits on the tribble, and Kirk looks away, and he looks at a crew member, and he looks, starts looking around the bridge. Well, the execs were like, well, yeah, that's the scene from the episode. What did you do with it? And they were like, look again. And when Kirk looks over to the side, in the original episode, there's nobody there. But whenever they superimpose Terry Farrell and standing in that spot, and he looks right at her, and they said that's Terry Farrell. And they were like, what? They were like, that was the execs was just blown away about how realistic.
Yeah. So on the Voyager episode, they actually had a flashback from Tuvok because Tuvok had been in Star Trek previously, or the actor. So they did a flashback to the Excelsior under Captain Sulu's command, and that was their kind of homage to the original series. When Enterprise came out in its final season, they did an episode where they go on an actual Constitution class ship. They used the mirror universe as a way for them to do it. And they actually had a fan-made bridge that they used to film the bridge sequences that was so perfect to detail that instead of building their own, they're like, oh, well, we'll just use this.
Yeah.
Kind of like Disney does with the 501st on Star Wars.
Yeah.
Oh, you need a couple stormtroopers? We know some guys.
And the cool thing about the Enterprise episode, they used a season 3 episode, original series called A Tholian Web, which it's a good episode, but a lot of people don't rank it real high. And there was another Constitution class ship. It was the Defiant that drifted off into a different universe. Well, what happened? It drifted into the mirror universe in Archer's time. So when you watch the mirror universe episodes during the original series, they're a lot more powerful. Their weaponry and all that is more powerful. It's because they managed to get a Constitution class ship 100 years before they were supposed to.
Right.
That's
Damn.
how Empire was able to conquer the Klingons, the Vulcans, and everybody else because they managed to get future tech 100 years ahead of time.
I'm disappointed when you were talking about the episode of DS9 where they go back in the past with Worf and they're looking at the table of Klingons.
Yeah.
And they're like, what? Those are Klingons? Was there some kind of genetic testing? And Worf's just like, oh, we don't talk about those guys.
Well, see, Star Trek Enterprise actually goes deep into that.
Yes.
Does it really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
season 4 of Enterprise has I think it's a 2-parter where they actually explain what happened and they actually make it plausible to why Klingons would be embarrassed to talk about it.
Yeah.
I'll put it at that. But yeah,
That's fantastic.
That's my season 4 of Enterprise is really good.
Yeah, that was the unfortunate thing about Enterprise is they canceled it right as it was starting to hit that stride. Like I said, after that 3rd season, it started to pick up, and they just didn't give it time.
So I have a question of something that happened in Star Trek Strange New Worlds. There's the episode where Pike gets to be himself in the future, but and he meets, of course, Kirk, which, by the way, I got to talk about that too. I loved, I can never remember the actor's name, but he's from Vampire Diaries. I loved his Kirk.
Wesley, I believe.
Yeah.
But what's up with the whole time crystal thing? I don't know any. Is that something new that they introduced, or is that something that's been in Star Trek before?
Well, since you're watching Discovery, you'll see how that transpires.
Okay, so that okay. Cool.
Your questions will be answered by the show.
The Federation has the answers to your questions. You just have to watch their material.
So
Here's a pamphlet.
I should have known that because I know that this Pike is in Discovery, and I know that something happened to him beforehand because at the beginning of Strange New Worlds, he's in like a dilemma over whatever happened in the last series. So it kind of felt weird that the show was starting off somewhere. Like, did I miss an episode? But then it just kept going and it was fine.
There's an original. It's actually the only 2-parter from the original series called The Menagerie. And it actually talks about what happened to Pike, and why Kirk, it was after Kirk got command of the ship, but Pike basically was in an accident and it disfigured him, pretty much, made him.
Puts him in a wheelchair. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It makes a wheelchair bound. He can't speak. All he does is flash his, button, one for yes, 2 for no. So Discovery, used that, and season 2 of Discovery answered a lot of those questions. Pike, manages to see his future, what's going to happen to him. And he has the option of doing his destiny, going through it, or he can avoid it. And that's what that Pike from the future, he come back because he avoided his destiny. And this was the result of doing that.
And so he showed him what happened, and it was basically what I got from it is because Kirk wasn't in command, that's why things ended worse, right?
Right. So if you watch the original episode, Balance of Terror, you'll see that was the one that we were talking about.
Yeah.
You'll see Kirk's solution in the original series was the correct one. Basically, that's what that episode's saying. Because a lot of people, incorrectly, I might add, always say that Kirk was not diplomatic and that he was a cowboy who always shot first and asked questions later.
That's Han Solo.
That is Han Solo.
Completely different space character.
If you notice, at the conclusion of most original series episodes, Kirk talks the people down, or he comes up with a creative solution that works for both sides more often than not. He only fights when it's the only solution.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he just happens to be better at it than Picard and all the rest of the captains. Just saying.
There was a reveal in Strange New Worlds that got to be a surprise to me because I'm not a big Trekkie and because don't know all the Star Trek lore. I didn't know that the Vulcans were the same species as Romulans.
Yeah.
So that episode came where there was the twist where Spock saw the Romulan for the first time. And that blew my mind. I went straight to Google. I was like, was this always a thing? It's like, oh, yeah, even in the original shows, like this was always a thing. And I'm like,
yeah. Episode of Strange New Worlds is almost line for line from Balance of Terror, which is one of the greatest original series. The one we was talking about earlier about the guy with the bigotry and all that. Because you remember, what's her name? The Helmsman lady, she was doing that. And then Pike kind of had to talk her down. She was the character that, the original series, it was a guy.
With that episode being, as you guys said, such like a word for word good thing from what happened in that other episode, would you guys be opposed to them? Because we talked about this a little bit before the recording, but I don't know if Frank was here yet. If they took the scripts from the original series and with these actors from Strange New Worlds did a series with him as Kirk, would you be behind that?
I would only be behind it if they do the 4th and 5th year of the Enterprise's missions.
Yes.
Those. So if you go by the idea that the animated series for the original series was the 4th year mission, you need to finish that 5th year mission because we don't know how it ended. We just know we go from the end of the 3rd season to Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which is by far my least favorite Star Trek movie. I hate to say it.
It's not my least favorite.
Flying through the cloud. I can't do it, dude.
Yeah, but the thing, there's a lot of things that unanswered questions that happen. The last, because Kirk was a command for 5 years. We only got to see 3 years of that on screen.
Right.
So that's like because when the motion picture rolls around, it's literally just say a year and a half after Kirk, his command ended with the Enterprise, he become an admiral.
And he's one of the youngest fleet.
They put in space dock to refit it. Well, you had Spock left Starfleet, McCoy left Starfleet, Decker become the new captain of the Enterprise. So we never really knew what exactly transpired for all that. Just kind of mentioned. We don't know why Spock would leave Starfleet. Why McCoy would leave Starfleet.
I think we know why McCoy left Starfleet.
Left a lot of loose threads there.
So I wouldn't be opposed if they was, because I've honestly thought for a long time this has been Paramount's goal is to start with Discovery, Strange New Worlds, and then the original series. That way it all meshes together. Because
for me,
or you look at the modern production values versus a show made 50 years ago. So I think
you're going to get more people in the doors to know what happened in the original series if it's redone with today's technology.
Well,
and even
respect it because I don't want them to like change anything and upset the fans. I want it to be the same lore. I just want to be able to experience everything you guys experienced, but with today's technology.
Well, I think what would.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, I think what they also have in mind is that they're going to reboot TNG eventually.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's
continuing Picard's story is a good lean that way.
Well,
I would say.
And it's not a bad thing. Like people are like, oh, like as a member of the 501st, I can say this. No one hates Star Wars like Star Wars fans.
Yep.
But with Star Trek, most Trek fans, the whole purpose of the Vulcan philosophy, the whole edict is infinite diversity, infinite combinations. There's enough room for more stories, even if it's not the stories you prefer. Like you said with Discovery, Discovery is not my favorite. Do I watch it? Yes. Do I enjoy it? Yes. Do I enjoy it as much as I enjoyed the original series? No. Did I enjoy Voyager as much as I did Deep Space Nine? No. But if it's on, am I going to turn it off? Again, the answer is no.
Yeah.
I just figured out what my problem is with Discovery, why I liked it at first and why it lost me. In the very first couple episodes of Discovery, the crew is mostly like a family.
Right.
as is most Star Trek shows. But then once everything that happens and she gets onto Discovery, it's not like a family at all.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
And it'll come back.
wartime, and
They
I know it will. I know eventually, because I mean, I was watching her in a dark time, but I know that she's the main character, and eventually she's gonna progress further. Right now, she's just at her low point.
Yeah.
Even though she got to the high point, she's at her low point, and I think that's also the other thing that kind of struck me.
Yeah. Well, the thing with Discovery, especially that first season, when they was producing it, like halfway through the first season production, they changed showrunners. So that's why the story, when you get about episode 4 or 5-ish, it really it goes to a different direction. So that's part of Discovery. Now, second season Discovery, it meshes because you had your consistent writing, producing. Third season, fourth season, but that first season though, because I think they had Nicholas Meyer to start it off with, then they replaced him. They went through 3 different showrunners. They had a shift, and it was a mess there for a while when they was getting that first season off the ground. So that explains some of it.
I love the things that ship can do, though.
Well, all right, so that's to get back on your topic that you brought up on the ships and the tech. So Discovery's tech is a lot different than the tech that we're used to in the traditional canon. And even within the original canon, you have different methods of propulsion. That's something that we didn't even talk about. Like the Romulans actually use a totally different power system. They're not using the same thing that the Federation's using. The Federation's using antimatter with the lithium crystals, and they have a warp core. So
artificial.
All I heard in that whole sentence was sciencey thing, sciencey thing, sciencey thing.
Real quick, I just want to say, sorry. There's a really good documentary called The Captains, where Shatner talks to a bunch of the actors that played the captains, and Kate Mulgrew in her interview with Shatner talks about how frustrating some days got because the shoots are so long, and it's just you have to memorize all of this technical jargon, and it drove her nuts.
And it's
not even just technical jargon; it's fictional technical jargon, which makes it even worse.
They line it up though, because it's consistent with each series. They keep the same. They keep the same fake science.
But not only that,
but it's not like a doctor studying human anatomy.
It's real to me, damn it.
But they put real science into it. Like they don't just.
That's what I was going to say. The point is the fake science is based off of real science, so it's actually fairly plausible.
And you're asking actors to remember all this. It's great. I love it.
Without advanced degrees.
But that's kind of what you sign up for with a science fiction show, though.
Right.
True. And not even science fiction shows. Look at the cast of Big Bang Theory and how much they had to learn. They don't actually have degrees in quantum physics.
One of them.
One of them does, but not all of them.
I love that interview where she
Amy Farrah Fowler does, but the rest of the cast is like they're having to pretend to be these educated in quantum entanglement, quantum physics, and the fictional stuff. They could have this same talk, but also talk about the real world things that come from these shows like this, and it's amazing. The actors, kudos, hand claps.
So what did you think they were looking at on the original series when they were looking out the view screen?
I'm going to say green screen.
Nope. Wow. There was a pole that they all were directed to look at. And Walter Koenig told this story that every once in a while there would be some stagehand who was trying to be funny, and he would put the Playmate fold-out centerfold on that pole for them all to stare at, so to see who would break character and who could focus.
I would be that stagehand.
Right. So
things you could do in the 60s.
Yeah, it happened a lot. The practical jokes. Yeah, there's all kinds of stories, practical jokes.
But
so do you guys have anything else with the ships and tech?
Well, that's what I was going to say. So one of the cool things about Star Trek, and I'll let Kevin go back and talk about what the Romulans use real quick. So part of the reason why the Balance of Terror was such a good episode was because the weaponry was different, their propulsion's different, and they had cloaking devices. Kevin, care to elaborate?
And yeah, the Romulans, see what they do every 50 years, 100 years, they would attack the Federation just to gauge how strong the Federation had progressed, to see if they were going to be a threat. So the Romulans they didn't have warp drive, and the Romulan bird of prey didn't have warp drive, but they had a plasma, like a big plasma ball that it would shoot toward the target, that it would expand. Very, very devastating weapon, because they had star bases along the neutral zone that was miles deep inside asteroids, and it was just pulverizing them. So the Enterprise shows up, it can outrun the bird of prey. It had, the weaponry on the Enterprise was similar, it was different. Like, let me back up. The Romulan plasma was just like a big ball. You shot it at the ship, it would hit, considerable damage. Enterprise had targeted phaser beams plus photon torpedoes. They could do precise targeting, where the bird of prey didn't have that. But the bird of prey had the cloaking device where it made them invisible. So you had
shoot a ball, disappear, appear over here, shoot a ball, disappear, appear over here. Yeah. Oh, dude, that's awesome.
But Spock found a way to detect the bird of prey using what they call a motion sensor. They couldn't see it. They couldn't they could get an approximate location of where it's at. Well, Kirk, in his, tactics, what he would do, he would get just within their sensor range, but he would stay far enough away to it would look like a sensor echo. So if they turn this way, Enterprise would turn the same way, back and forth. So the Romulans, at first they thought, it's a sensor echo. Well, then, the Romulan command, then they said, well, let's turn an attack. Well, let me back up. There was a comet, and the Romulan ship was going toward the comet. And Kirk, they said, well, when they go through the comet, we'll be able to see them. So we're going to swing around and catch them as they come out. The Romulans decided when they got inside, they were going to turn to a 180 and shoot backwards toward the Enterprise. So when Kirk discovered, whenever they discovered that, Kirk said, well, I underestimated him. I won't do it again. So that's when they opened fire. And that's when, the combat begins. But that's what was so good about that episode. You had this ship had a superior in this way, and this ship had superior in that way. It came down to the tactics between the two captains.
So
that was the bird of prey from Enterprise.
Right.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question to that?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's too technical, but what's the difference between a phaser and a disruptor?
It's the way that the energy.
You can set your phasers to stun. I know that.
Yeah.
You can set disruptors to stun.
Don't break my knowledge, Frank. No, I'm kidding.
Have it over the years, it's more like the way the phaser, the energy beam, when it hits a target, what it does to the target. So the phaser beam will just, kind of more heat related damage. Where it, if you're going to kill setting, it'll, vaporize somebody. Where a disruptor, when the beam hits the target, it literally disrupts the molecules of that target, and it's supposed to be a more painful death.
Because I know the Klingons and the Romulans used disruptors, and then Federation had phasers. But to me, it just looks like red laser beams. So I'm like, what is the difference?
All right, so
energy
Phaser's more like a laser, disruptor's more like a EMP that shatters your molecules.
Something like that. That's where
almost like ultrasonic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So if you look, the reason why the Klingons and the Romulans both use disruptors is the same reason why the Klingon D7 is the exact same as the Romulans attack cruiser. Is because the Romulans and the Klingons started to share technology to gain an advantage over the Federation.
Which is why they can both cloak.
Right.
Yep.
I'm learning so much.
So
got the cloaking device from. That's where the Romulans got their initial warp drive from. They swapped technologies.
Yep.
Okay.
one thing I really love about Star Trek Lower Decks is usually when I see them use phasers or stuff like that in the regular show, you don't really see much of anything. You might see a thing blast for a second, but like in Star Trek Lower Decks, because it's animated, every time they're using those things, you see a beam every time going through everything. Because of animation, you could do so much more than CGI.
Yeah.
Wait, quick question, real quick, because Well, then that doesn't make sense. So if the Romulans and Klingons share technology, so they both have cloaking ability, when the Klingons broke away from their truce with the Romulans and linked up with the Federation, why didn't the Federation get cloaking technology?
Because the Romulans are dicks. Not just kidding.
No, because there were two different treaties. So you had the Peace Accords of Kenmore, which Kirk kind of helped foster along because of him saving the Chancellor. But the Romulans had a separate truce with the Federation that established the neutral zone, but also said that they would not use cloaking technology because in the original series, Kirk's Enterprise steals a Romulan cloaking device and takes it back to the Federation. But part of their updated treaty was that they would not use that technology.
So because Kirk screwed up, we don't get cloaking devices?
No, Kirk didn't screw up. He was successful, but the Federation, being the good guys, were like, well, we won't use this thing that our awesome captain was able to procure for us.
Fair enough.
Fair enough.
That's how it was written too. It's, our awesome captain did this, but we'll play fair.
In the grand scheme of things, Kirk didn't get one. He got two cloaking devices. He stole one from the Klingons.
Yeah.
How many times have they limited themselves because of rules that they make for themselves?
Depends on the captain.
All of these shows.
That
depends on the captain.
I mean,
well, because there was an episode of Next Generation where they were talking to Picard and they gave him a number. It was 8 or 11 times he went against the Prime Directive.
See, this is why I know I could never survive in a military setting, because I'm the person who thinks the rules apply to a certain degree, but when you know that whatever your superior is saying is going to make people die, like in Star Trek Discovery, she makes the wrong decision for her career, but she makes the right decision for saving lives. But it didn't matter because there's the rules there, and so sometimes the rules just aren't.
Well, if Star Trek's shown anything, it's that there's always wiggle room.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
but there's also
honest,
consequences because at the end of the day, if they break the rules, it's cool if everyone's saved, but they still have consequences with Starfleet.
Right.
And let's be honest, this isn't a Star Trek exclusive idea at all. But let's be honest, in most things, from a storytelling aspect, we love a rebel that rebels against a too structured system to do good.
Captain America and
Captain America becoming nomad,
right?
Batman becoming a vigilante.
I'm sorry,
up the streets of Gotham.
Consequences from Starfleet. What consequences?
Well, if you look, so even when Kirk takes the Enterprise to go back and save Spock, he then steals this Romulan bird of prey, goes back in time, gets these whales, saves the Earth for the 1000th time. He still gets busted down to captain. They take his rank away from him. Regardless of
he
the
still
fact,
ends up an admiral.
No, he never gets promoted back to admiral.
Okay,
back to admiral.
That's what I'm saying. He was an admiral when he did,
but he wasn't court-martialed. He wasn't executed by firing squad. I mean,
they were going to court-martial him, but because they were like, well, it would be a dick move to court-martial the guy who just saved all of humanity.
Yeah.
So they demoted him?
The best we could do is demote him to captain. If we do anything more than that,
he had tenure at that point. They couldn't get rid of him.
Wasn't he super retired?
Put him somewhere.
No, he wasn't retired at that point.
Well, I thought. Well, I'm only saying that because again, my TOS knowledge is so small. But I thought in the next gen movies, I thought when Picard had seen him, he was an admiral. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think the only reason they referred to him as Admiral Kirk at any point in the future when they talk about him is they were just simply referring to him as the highest rank he'd ever achieved.
Yeah. See, I think
but Burnham was court-martialed and she was actually imprisoned for her crime of mutiny. Yeah. But her mutiny was she had a positive reason for doing it, but the rules were still there, and so now she's starting from the bottom again. At least where I am in the series.
Now she's here.
She works her way.
Now she's here.
Well, I haven't gotten to where she's here now. Where I am, she's still kind of at the bottom. She's not imprisoned anymore, but she's still seen as the mutineer.
But started from the bottom, now she's here.
Yeah. But if you look, I mean, that is a huge recurring theme in every episode, every iteration of Star Trek.
Yep.
Kirk constantly was breaking the Prime Directive or breaking the rules when he saw that it was for the greater good.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Picard does it over and over again.
And
Cisco
the
does
temporal Prime Directive.
it. Correct. Yeah, even when they show up on DS9, they even say you're like the worst offender since Kirk.
Yeah.
The temporal directive thing, or I don't know what it's called in Bear Help Me.
In what? The
The
Orville?
Orville. In the Orville, they have something similar, like temporal law.
Yeah, they don't call it the temporal directive. It's the laws for
I think it was
for
temporal law or something.
temporal law, I think is what they call it.
So the Orville is the second best Star Trek show on right now, right?
Yeah, the Orville's my favorite
Right.
Star Trek show.
I
And
love
it's not
the
even a
Orville.
Star Trek
We
show.
actually have it here on the list of stuff to chat about because it may not be Star Trek, but it's basically Star Trek.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
That
it's
brings
like
us
the
to pretty much the final topic of imitations, reboots in the future. Now, we talked a little bit about reboots already, but what are some of y'all's favorite iterations of imitations of Star Trek related things?
it's easy. The second best Star Trek movie ever made. Arguably, some people will say the best Star Trek
Galaxy
movie ever
Quest?
made. Galaxy Quest, right?
Yes. Yes.
I don't think I've ever seen Galaxy Quest.
It's my favorite Tim Allen movie, too.
Yeah.
Maybe I have then. I seem to remember Tim Allen.
Yeah,
in
never
space.
give up, never surrender.
It's
Yeah.
what Sigourney Weaver. Weaver's in that, right?
Alan
Yeah.
Rickman. Yeah,
Alan Rickman
Okay.
and Tim Allen. And they went so far as to name the ship the NTE. The call letters for the ship in Galaxy Quest are NTE, and then it has the numbers, and it stands for not the Enterprise.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. I'm
Well,
gonna have to give that a watch and see if I remember it.
I think it's currently available on Paramount. I think
That would make sense because everything. I mean, I know it's. You
Let me
said
see.
it's not Star Trek, but most Star Trek stuff is on Paramount Plus. That's where I'm
Yeah.
watching all my stuff right now.
Same.
Paramount Plus is the place to be a Trekkie.
things
Yep,
that-
Paramount Plus, Galaxy Quest is on there. Go and give it a watch. That is, yeah.
I don't think all the movies is on there for some odd reason. No, that's what. Yeah, I don't think all the Star Trek movies is on Paramount Plus at the moment. I don't know
about the
why.
Pine ones. I know the next gen ones are, and I thought the original
And
ones
they made-
were.
I looked for them a while back and then I didn't see them on there.
Paramount Plus does this weird thing where they update a lot of stuff and they don't tell nobody.
Well,
So-
yeah, because for a while they were on HBO Max. Like it's like they've got some kind of trading back and forth that they're doing.
Well, and HBO Max does that too. Like, I know this is completely off topic, but I was on HBO Max last night and I found out they did a prequel series to Supernatural. It's called The Winchesters.
Yeah, that was on CW. Yeah,
I didn't know.
I haven't watched it yet, but I heard
I
it's
was out of
good.
the loop.
And here's the crazy thing about it that I don't understand because I haven't watched it. It's a prequel of Sam and Dean's parents when they're young, but Dean's in it somehow, and I don't know how. I don't get it. Maybe
Time
it's
travel.
time travel, but they didn't do a
Because
whole
time
lot
travel.
of. They did a little bit of time travel in Supernatural, but it wasn't like a big thing. Like that just
It
feels
wasn't a
cheap.
sci-fi show. They
but-
did more than they should have.
You guys should do an episode where you just do time travel as a plot device. Like what
We
a
did
beautiful
actually.
thing.
We did an episode about
I meant
that.
a second one.
We'll do a
I
second.
mean, it's
We'll
basically a
travel back
time
in time
heist.
and change our opinions of that episode.
Making a prequel.
Dude.
No,
So-
about the
the
Oracle. Before Discovery came out, Seth MacFarlane pitched an idea to Paramount about a Star Trek series he wanted to do, and Paramount turned him down. So a lot of people say the Orville is what an offshoot of what he had halfway pitched to Paramount as far
Yeah.
as for
Because then Fox
Well,
was
you know
like,
what?
hey, we love you. You're making us money with Family Guy. Come here.
Yeah.
Come here. And then he made the first 2 seasons there. And then Hulu was like, hey, come here. We'll give you the money
Fox
for
was
the
always
third one.
screwed over Seth MacFarlane.
You know.
Let's be honest.
I wonder if they were just feeling super protective, like they were afraid he would diminish the quality of their
You know-
franchise.
Well,
you know, Seth MacFarlane actually cameoed on Enterprise. I think it was 2 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
I can see why someone would be fearful that he would like diminish Star Trek because when I resisted watching the Orville, it's because I saw that as just a Star Trek spoof. That's what I thought it was. And when I watch spoofs, I want to watch a spoof movie, not a spoof show.
Yeah, like
And
Scary
so-
Movie 4 or Meet the
Like,
Spartans.
Spoofs are fine, but
Just the first
they
two
just,
scary
they
movies.
just don't. Just the first scary movie. I tried watching the second one, couldn't get into it. Anyways,
3 and 4 weren't good. Haunted House.
the
was good.
Orville, the Orville's not a spoof. It has comedy in it, especially the first season is more comedy than the second 2 seasons. Absolutely. But it is really Seth MacFarlane. I said this before the recording. Seth MacFarlane is a big nerd who's got his own toy box of a universe that he gets to do whatever he wants with. And that's freaking cool.
It is.
Yeah.
Just
It's
like
not even-
Lucille Ball that started all of this.
He's
You know,
got
he
access
has
to
his
other
own-
people's toy boxes that he
Yep.
gets to play with and tweak. Like with his Star Wars trilogy on Family Guy. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
He doesn't even do Family Guy anymore. Like he comes in for the voice work, but
he doesn't
I don't
write
know,
it.
he doesn't
stepped
write
away.
it anymore. Like I think he's focusing on the Orville or whatever projects he has. Family Guy's not his main focus anymore.
He said in an interview he finally hired the right people that he was competent that would write it the way he would, so he was able to step away. And they also canceled the Cleveland show, so he didn't have to worry about that one anymore. So
I love that show. That was so much fun.
Love Cleveland.
I'm just waiting on Ted 3. That's
yeah.
Ted 3 and the Orville season 4. Give it to me.
Either that or give me a 2 million ways to die in the West.
The best Liam Neeson cameo ever.
No, best Liam Neeson cameo was Ted 2 when he bought the tricks.
Oh yeah,
The tricks, yeah.
I'll give you that.
So you're saying it won't be followed.
So how
on the
much
box.
of Star Trek Lower Decks have you guys watched? I'm on season 3 myself.
All of it.
All of it?
Watched all- Yep, all of it.
Dude, Lower Decks is.
You asked Trekkies if they've watched a Trek show. It's like
Well, yeah, there are a lot of people out there that are hardcore Trek fans who want to hate on Lower Decks because it's a little silly. But, dude, you want to talk about a show that really pays homage to everything Trek. It pays wonderful homages to the original series. It talks about things on TNG like they just happened. They've had Jonathan Frakes guest star on it. They've had everybody. They've had O'Brien.
Yeah.
And they've even talked about how he was actually the most important person in Starfleet history. I mean, it's an excellent show.
It's definitely wacky, but like it doesn't like insult Star Trek. It still has
Right.
its own deep story that it's telling, just in a funnier way, in a more like adult animation kind of way.
I might have
But
to
it's not
watch
even
that
like
one.
that far into adult animation. Like you're not seeing them cuss every 10 seconds or like make fun of like celebrities. Like they're still doing Star Trek stuff.
Right.
It's Simpsons level animation, but it's Star Trek.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
The
not
only
Rick
way
and
I would
Morty.
say that it's
Rick
not
and Morty level
realistic.
adult animation.
The only way I would say that it's not realistic as far as other Star Trek shows would be realistic is that, like most comedy shows, everything can get messed up during the whole episode. Like everything can become a mess, but at the end of the episode, everything's fixed, everything's put back together, and most people are back in their places. Or if they're not, they will be in a couple episodes.
Well, and they actually kind of get into that. I think later on, there's kind of almost a joke about that, but that's the
bridge
point.
the bridge crew dying.
Right. And
Yeah.
then there's also yeah, you should have given him a spoiler alert.
Spoilers.
Well, It's like they're making jokes about how bridge crew members can die, but then they mysteriously come back. Like, how does that look to the people on the lower decks who don't
Right.
get the full breathe down?
So is Lower Decks the Star Trek version of the Clone Wars? Kind of like with the way the Clone
No.
Wars is cartoon or animated for Star Wars?
No, it's basically, do you remember there was a TNG episode about
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
lower deck? They were ensigns who were trying to get lieutenant.
Yeah.
I thought that was
And-
a great episode. It was in the final season, I think.
That's what this is. It's a show
Okay.
from the lower decks perspective. These are your assistants. These are your people who are trying to get bridge positions, or they're trying to rank up and get
The other 800 people on the Enterprise.
right. Exactly.
Usually
they're not all red shirts because they don't all die. So,
Boo.
Look,
Mariner's my favorite. I
look,
love Mariner.
that's one of my pet peeves is the red shirt thing. Is because
Tried to
people
warn you.
they look at TNG and they'll go, "Oh, you're going to die. You're wearing a red shirt." It's like that's only applicable to the original series because they changed the colors after the original series, and Command stopped being gold. Command started to be security and ops. So you were more likely to die in a gold shirt in TNG than you were in a red shirt because red shirt was now Command.
Yeah, and that Gene Roddenberry actually did that just because of even back in the 80s, people was making fun. Oh, red shirts always died. He said, "Well, I'm going to switch it then." Whenever
The coolest death of a red shirt was stepping on an exploding rock.
Yeah.
So the sense I get from Lower Decks is that it kind of takes place after everything, but also during everything. Because like they'll mention characters that may have existed like 100 years ago, but then they'll like, oh, this character exists now. So does it have like a timeline thing, or is it just supposed to be that out there? It just really is.
It's supposed to be out there, but in the timeline chronological sense, it takes place in between, say, Star Trek Nemesis and then Star Trek Picard. It's like
Okay.
So yeah, it's kind of.
Because I mean,
yeah,
because they reference
suits that they wear,
things.
their uniforms look very similar to like the Next Generation uniforms.
Yeah, just slightly more modern. Kind of like they almost look like what Riker's wearing on the Titan.
Yeah.
Maybe. So probably that, and they even have Riker on the Titan because Ensign Bomer goes over becomes
but
lieutenant.
he gets his like he splits. Oh, I love that. It's like he still has to go back.
Yeah.
Because you got to put the characters back where they belong.
Right. So that's one of the coolest things about Lower Decks too, is that every other version of Star Trek, you're always dealing with like these global. If we don't do this, humanity dies. If we don't do this, the Federation gets destroyed. If we don't do this, some catastrophic thing's going to happen. Whereas you may have an episode, if I don't do this like I'm supposed to, then I may get stuck on cleaning detail for a month. Like it's the stakes are so
the
different.
main crew will have first contact. They have second contact.
Right.
They do all the paperwork and the boring shit.
Right.
Hey, they called it lower stakes.
You made it this.
Yes,
you made it this whole episode.
Yes, I
Brian.
did. I'm getting better at that. I am.
You are.
So,
for gosh sake, watch your language.
That's not going away anytime soon.
So one thing that I think is kind of funny about that is that was something they did when they did Star Wars: The Force Awakens. When they finally get to the planet and Han Solo asks, he's like, well, "What did you do, by the way?" He's like, "Oh, I was a janitor." Like when he wasn't a stormtrooper, he was in sanitation. He's like, "You're what?"
Yeah.
I mean, you got to have someone do that.
Right.
In the Imperial Army, it's got to be a stormtrooper.
Yeah. I lay awake at night thinking about all the innocent lives lost when the Death Star blew up.
Do not steal the clerk's bit. I know what you're doing.
But not even just that. They, in that clerk's bit, proved that theory is still wrong because they took the job to build the Death Star.
Times is tough.
Times is tough when an empire's trying to take you over.
Imperials.
Okay.
I know we're talking to
the legitimate government.
Exactly. Thank you very much. As a Darth Vader cosplayer, they were the legitimately elected form of government. They were all Vader wanted. He tells Luke over and over, "Join me." He doesn't say join me so we can crush the life out of people. He says join me so we can end this senseless conflict and restore order to the galaxy. He was a pacifist.
He was
we want him to join him so that he could kill the Emperor, be the Lord, Sith Lord, and then Luke would be his apprentice.
Well, yeah, but I mean, he tells him so that they could restore the order, right?
That sounds like Borg talk. That's what that sounds like.
Vader was kind of a Borg.
All Hitler wanted to do was run Germany, right?
Borg talk would have been resistance is futile. You will be assimilated.
I mean, people
Didn't the
make
Emperor say
arguments
resistance
about-
is futile?
I'm pretty sure he did at one point.
Yeah.
I'm
See, we're
sorry.
never gonna agree.
I'm
with
sorry.
some
There's not a
rebels and some
scene in a film
Imperials.
that says resistance is futile more than Darth Vader appearing from the red light of his own lightsaber on the Republican gunship at the end of Rogue One.
If they had
Hey,
just returned the plans they had stolen, he wouldn't have had to lay
from
the
the
law
Death
down.
for the Death Star that's gonna blow up Alderaan, which is a peaceful
Wait,
planet.
now I got to switch sides because when
So
the
now the
rebels steal
Imperials are
plans,
so
they're the
innocent.
bad guys. When Kirk steals something, he's the good guy.
I'm just saying.
I'm just saying.
You know
oh,
what's
that's
funny
fantastic.
is because we're Star Trek fans and Star Wars fans, we're breaking that whole Star Trek versus Star Wars thing right
Yeah,
now
no, this-
because we're talking about both.
I can tell you the reason why it's okay for Kirk to do it
I bet you can.
is because he's captain of the Enterprise. He can do
Because it's
whatever the heck
Kirk,
he
yeah.
wants to. And the reason Darth Vader had the right to, take care of those rebels is because it was actually the Death Star was a name attributed by the rebels, and the Empire was just like, well, I guess they've already named it. We'll have to go with it. It was originally going to be called the Peace Star.
The Peace Star.
I saw a thing once. It was some comedy bit where I don't know if they were Nazis or whatnot, but they had the uniforms, they had the skulls, and the guy looks at him and is like, "We've got the skulls. Are we the baddies?" And I forget what it was, but you ever think like, why does our guy have the red lightsaber? Is he the bad guy?
No
Like,
way. Red looks
So
way cooler.
I just want to get back to the whole Peace Star thing.
Oh my God.
Just imagine the Peace Star rolling up on Alderaan. We're bringing peace.
Hey, we're not here to blow up your planet as any kind of threat or anything.
No.
We're
I'm
gonna
just
get
saying,
you off the planet
we're
first.
bringing-
We're gonna blow it to smithereens for the intergalactic
Pieces.
space highway.
They're making into pieces. That's their form of peace. is
Answer
making
this
a-
question. Answer this question. Did the Empire or did they not reduce crime on Alderaan to zero? Did they or
Who
did they
cares if they
not?
reduced crime? They blew everyone to smithereens.
You know what?
Did they or did they not bring peace to Alderaan in one fell swoop? Just answer the question.
You
That is-
can't deny those
Peace
statistics.
and death.
That's a
Crime
good
went
statistic.
down 100%.
Unemployment didn't exist. There was no food shortage.
This one
Period.
time on Alderaan, me and my girlfriend, we were hanging out, but then it got blown up, and she was like, "There was no way."
This is how Thanos got people to follow him.
You know
I can
what,
take care
though?
of your hunger problem with the
Thanos in
snap.
Infinity War. Thanos in Infinity War. I see his side to a point, but Thanos in Endgame. That's a different Thanos coming. That's shreds. That's the bad guy.
You ever watch pitch meetings on YouTube with
Yes, we love Ryan George.
where he talks about Endgame and he does it, he's like, and we'll just write away all the character development we had for Thanos.
Now he just wants to rip everything to shreds.
Yeah.
Done.
No.
Well, guys, this has been a blasty blast of a conversation. I want to thank each and every one of you for being here, but we are running long.
Yes.
Listener, viewer, if you've stuck around this long, I hope you did, because much like Star Trek, it got really good toward the end, didn't it?
Right.
The Peace Star.
The Peace Star. No talking nerdy segment this week, but we are going to wrap it up. Peter, they can find you over on Umbrellaholics, but you also said you have another podcast you're working on. Yes,
that got paused, but definitely Umbrellaholics. Anywhere you can listen to podcasts. We're on season 3, and Facebook Umbrellaholics.
Did you do any of the voices for our outro song thing? Did you do any of those voices?
I'm gonna say maybe. I know Beck hit me up with something at the end of an ADR session. I don't know if that it was for that or what I did. So I'll say maybe.
Well, we do thank the Umbrellaholics team and all of their voice actors and everybody else for not only our outro song, but just for being some pretty cool people. Umbrellaholics is doing another season that should be coming out after a hiatus, but go and check out all their back catalog now. And
Season 3 is currently, I think they're on episode 10, with an episode coming out tomorrow. So we're finishing up
Ooh,
season
okay.
3, and obviously YouTube for UH Sounds.
Yes. And see if you can spot Peter in the episodes. So Geeking Cool. I know y'all haven't put out much. Y'all have pretty much been on our show a lot, but y'all are always at cons and doing cosplays. So do y'all have anything coming up that y'all want people to be aware of?
We should be finally launching our season 2 first episode shortly. We don't have an exact date, but unfortunately, I took a new job. Derek took a new job, and Kevin's schedule completely changed. So we've just been kind of struggling to catch a break where we can all be together.
Getting together,
Well,
right?
if we don't see you before June, we hope to see you at Mississippi Comic Con for sure, so we can hang out some more. And we really appreciate y'all being here. In the meantime, I think it's time to get out of here. I've been the Bear.
I've been the Beard.
We want to remind you, as always, to stay awesome,
stay bearded,
and much love, guys. Thank you, and be careful when you boldly go where no man has gone before. We're out of here.
Boom, cut the check.
That was totally wicked!
Thanks for checking out another Bearded Bear Entertainment production. New episodes of this show are released every other Friday at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time in both audio and video format. Audio episodes are available pretty much anywhere you get your podcasts, and YouTube is the only place for video format.
For listeners, subscribe on your app so your device downloads it automatically. And for viewers, subscribe and click that little bell so you're notified about all our new nerdy content. Also, don't forget to follow us on our socials.
Facebook,
Instagram, and
TikTok
are all great places to interact with us.
Many thanks to the rest of our team, all of our geeks of the round table, and all of our awesome friends of the cast. Much love, y'all. Lastly, for more cool music like this awesome outro track, go check out HarlequinSoul, Secret Apex on Facebook and Spotify. His links are in the description as well.
Talk at you next episode, nerds.
See you then!